When I turned 65, I cooked dinner for 8 people. By 9 o'clock, even the candles had given up on me. I spent 3 weeks planning that birthday dinner. 3 weeks choosing recipes Ethan used to love when he was a boy. 3 weeks polishing silverware I barely touched anymore. 3 weeks pretending that if I worked hard enough, loved carefully enough, my family might finally feel like mine again. The dining room looked beautiful that evening. Soft golden candles flickered against the mahogany table. Fresh white roses sat in the center beside the chocolate cake I'd baked from scratch that morning. 8 place cards rested neatly beside the plates, written in my careful cursive handwriting. Loretta, Ethan, Vanessa, Emma, Tommy, Ruth, Carl, and one empty chair at the far end of the table that still belonged to my late husband, Daniel, at least in my heart. I wore a navy blue dress with pearl buttons because Daniel always said navy made me look elegant. At 65, you stop dressing up for compliments from strangers. You dress up for memories. At 5:45 p.m., I checked the roast in the oven for the 3rd time. At 5:52, I adjusted the candles. At 5:57, I looked through the front window when headlights passed the house. Not them. By 6:10, I told myself people were probably running late. Tommy had soccer practice. Vanessa always took forever getting ready. Ethan worked too much. Life happened. I kept smiling anyway. I'm glad you're here with me. Follow my story until the end, and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes I wonder how many other mothers are sitting at quiet dinner tables tonight pretending they aren't hurt. At 6:30, the food was getting cold. I called Ethan first. Straight to voicemail. Hey, sweetheart, I said after the beep, trying to sound cheerful. Just checking if you're close. Dinner's ready. I waited. Nothing. Then Vanessa. Voicemail again. My sister Ruth didn't answer either, which felt strange. Ruth answered everything. Once she picked up during a dental cleaning, just to ask if I needed anything. I stood there holding my phone while the grandfather clock in the hallway ticked louder and louder. Tick, tick, tick. The silence inside the house felt unnatural. Heavy, like something waiting to happen. At 7:05, I reheated the mashed potatoes. At 7:20, I blew out 2 candles because they'd already melted halfway down. At 7:43, I caught myself fixing my lipstick after hearing a car door outside. I opened the front door too quickly. A teenage boy from next door was delivering pizza to his friends. Oh, sorry, I whispered. He looked confused. I closed the door gently and leaned against it for a moment longer than I should have. That was the first moment humiliation truly settled into my chest. Not anger. Humiliation. Because deep down, a woman always knows when she's being avoided. By 8 p.m., I knew they weren't coming. The roast beef had dried out beneath the warming foil. The green beans were limp. The cake remained untouched on the counter, perfect and useless. I sat slowly in my chair at the head of the table and stared at the 8 untouched plates. The house creaked softly around me. Somewhere upstairs, the heater clicked on. I remember looking at Emma's little place card and suddenly wondering if my granddaughter would even recognize my handwriting when she grew older. That thought hurt more than the empty chairs. I shouldn't have opened Facebook. But loneliness makes people cruel to themselves. The first photo appeared at the top of my screen before the page fully loaded. Vanessa stood beside Ethan on the deck of a cruise ship, wearing a flowing white sundress and oversized sunglasses. Behind them stretched endless blue ocean beneath a bright Mediterranean sky. My son had his arm around her waist. Both of them were laughing. The caption read, "Family cruise time, Red Heart finally relaxing with the people who matter most." My stomach dropped so suddenly I actually grabbed the edge of the table. I kept scrolling. Tommy building sandcastles. Emma holding ice cream bigger than her face. My sister Ruth raising a champagne glass beside Carl. Everyone smiling. Everyone together. Everyone except me. The timestamp said the photos had been uploaded 42 minutes earlier. While I was standing in my kitchen reheating mashed potatoes for people already halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. This wasn't forgetting. This wasn't miscommunication. This was planned. Carefully planned. Vanessa had organized a family vacation on my birthday and somehow convinced every single person I loved to keep it from me. Even Ruth. Especially Ruth. A text message buzzed seconds later. Ethan. Sorry, Mom. Totally forgot to tell you. Vanessa surprised us with the cruise this week. Happy birthday, though. Happy birthday, though. I read that sentence 3 times. The son I carried for 9 months. The little boy who used to crawl into bed beside me after nightmares. The teenager who cried in my arms after his first heartbreak. And now he sent me happy birthday though, like he was canceling a dentist appointment. I set the phone face down on the table because my hand had started shaking. The candles flickered weakly. One finally died with a tiny thread of smoke curling upward into the silence. I got up slowly and walked to the kitchen. I wrapped the untouched cake in plastic wrap. Carefully, methodically, as if moving gently could somehow stop my heart from cracking open inside my chest. Then I began clearing the table, one plate at a time. The china clicked softly together. Every sound felt too loud in the empty house. I kept thinking about Vanessa's smile in those cruise photos. Bright, victorious, like someone who had finally won something. And maybe she had, because over the last 5 years, little things had started happening. Small exclusions, tiny humiliations. Christmas dinners changed at the last minute. Birthday invitations accidentally forgotten. School events with the wrong starting time. Every single time, Vanessa had an explanation ready before I could even ask questions. "Oh, Loretta, didn't Ethan tell you? You know how chaotic things are. I thought you preferred quiet evenings at home. Always sweet, always polished, always making me feel foolish for noticing." I walked back into the dining room carrying a stack of plates when something in one of the cruise photos caught my eye. I froze, then slowly picked up my phone again. Vanessa stood near the ship, railing with one hand resting against her chest. Against her neck hung a diamond necklace with a small sapphire pendant. My breath caught instantly. Daniel's necklace. The one he bought me on our 30th anniversary. The necklace he held in trembling hands while cancer hollowed him out from the inside. "For my beautiful girl," he'd whispered back then. I hadn't seen it in almost a year. Vanessa once claimed she borrowed it for a charity event and forgot where she put it. I zoomed in closer. There was no mistake. She was wearing my dead husband's necklace on a luxury cruise while I sat alone beside a cold birthday dinner she'd deliberately abandoned. Something inside me shifted then. Quietly. Dangerously. Not loud anger. Not tears. Something colder. Because for the first time in years, I stopped asking myself whether Vanessa disliked me. And I finally started asking the question that truly mattered. Why was she trying so hard to erase me from my own family? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me while the silence inside the house pressed against my chest like a weight. Every few minutes, I checked my phone. Not because I expected Ethan to call. Because some pathetic part of me still hoped he would. Maybe he'd suddenly realize what they'd done. Maybe he'd step away from Vanessa and finally say, "Mom, this was wrong." But the screen stayed dark. At 2:17 a.m., Vanessa uploaded another cruise photo. This one showed everyone at dinner beneath strings of white lights on the ship deck. My granddaughter Emma sat in Ethan's lap, smiling beside a giant birthday dessert with sparklers. Birthday dessert. For a moment, I couldn't breathe properly. Vanessa's caption read, "Celebrating life with the people we love most." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I quietly turned my phone face down on the nightstand. Because at some point, pain stops feeling sharp. It becomes cold instead. The next morning, my dining room still smelled faintly of roast beef and candle smoke. The untouched cake sat in the refrigerator exactly where I'd left it. I opened the fridge, looked at it, closed the fridge again. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away yet. Maybe because tossing it out would make everything feel permanent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows while I made coffee for one. For 37 years, I made coffee for two. Even after Daniel got sick, I still poured his cup automatically every morning. Half cream, one sugar. Funny how grief trains your body slower than your mind. I carried my mug into the living room and sat in Daniel's old chair. The cruise photos kept replaying in my head. Vanessa smiling. Ruth holding champagne. Ethan looking relaxed in a way he never looked around me anymore. That hurt almost as much as being excluded. My son used to laugh easily. Now every visit felt rushed. Careful, like he was always trying not to upset someone. Someone meaning Vanessa. I picked up the framed photo beside the lamp. It was taken 12 years earlier at Emma's baptism. Ethan stood proudly beside me with one arm around Vanessa while she held baby Emma wrapped in white lace. Back then, I actually thought Vanessa liked me. Or maybe I simply wanted to believe she did. The first crack appeared during Tommy's 4th birthday party. I remember it clearly now. Vanessa called 2 hours before the party, sounding breathless and apologetic. "Oh, Loretta, I feel terrible. We had to switch venues last minute because of plumbing issues. She gave me a new address across town. I drove 40 minutes in pouring rain only to discover the building was completely empty. No balloons. No children. Nothing. When I called Ethan, he sounded confused. "Mom, what do you mean? The party's at the same place we planned." I still remember the silence afterward. That awkward silence where both of us slowly realized someone had lied. Vanessa blamed stress. Said she mixed up the addresses accidentally. I accepted the apology because decent people want explanations to make sense. Looking back now, I realize manipulation survives on exactly that kind of politeness. 3 months later came Emma's dance recital. Vanessa told me the performance started at 8 p.m. When I arrived at the school auditorium, janitors were already stacking chairs. A woman near the stage smiled sadly when she saw my confusion. "Oh, honey, the recital ended an hour ago." I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers cramped. Emma loved when I brought flowers after performances. That night, the bouquet sat beside me on the passenger seat all the way home, dying slowly, just like my place in the family. At the time, Ethan apologized repeatedly. But Vanessa? Vanessa tilted her head and gave me that soft little smile she always used before saying something cruel. "You know how forgetful things can get at our age." At our age, I was 61 then, not 90. I should have heard the insult hiding underneath the sweetness. But women like Vanessa never attack openly. They operate quietly, like water slipping beneath a locked door. By lunchtime, the rain outside had grown heavier. I tried distracting myself by cleaning the kitchen, but every object in the house carried memories. Tommy's favorite cereal still sat in my pantry because I always kept it for visits that happened less and less lately. Emma's coloring books remained stacked beside the fireplace. The guest room upstairs still had children's blankets folded neatly at the foot of the bed. I kept preparing space for people already leaving me behind. Around 1 p.m., my sister Ruth finally called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Loretta," she said carefully. "You upset?" Upset. Such a small word for something this humiliating. "I think abandoned is probably closer," I replied. Silence. Then came the sigh. "Oh, honey, Vanessa said you didn't want to travel anymore." I actually laughed. A short, ugly sound that surprised even me. "She told all of you that?" "Well, yes. She said crowds exhaust you now." My chest tightened. Another lie. Another tiny theft of dignity done quietly behind my back. Ruth sounded uncomfortable. "You know how Vanessa is." Yes. I was finally beginning to. "Did Ethan know?" I asked softly. Ruth hesitated too long. That was answer enough. My own son knew they were excluding me. He just chose the easier side. After the call ended, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time listening to the refrigerator hum. I kept remembering little things. Christmas dinners canceled at the last second. Family photos somehow never sent to me. Weekend trips I only learned about afterward through social media. Even Mother's Day last year. Vanessa told me Ethan wanted a quiet day at home. Later that night, Emma accidentally mentioned the restaurant they all went to with Vanessa's parents. I spent Mother's Day eating soup alone while strangers posted flower photos online. And still I kept forgiving them. That realization hurt worst of all, because humiliation becomes addiction when mixed with hope. At 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another cruise upload. This time Vanessa posted a video from the ship casino. Ethan stood beside her laughing while she waved a stack of chips dramatically toward the camera. Then Tommy's voice shouted from behind the phone. "Mommy says Grandma Loretta hates vacations." Vanessa laughed. Not shocked. Not embarrassed. Just laughed. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. Children don't invent sentences like that. They repeat them. I replayed the video 3 times. Each time noticing something colder in Vanessa's expression. Satisfaction. Like she enjoyed shaping how my grandchildren saw me. Like erasing me wasn't enough anymore. Now she needed them to help erase me too. The house suddenly felt unbearably quiet. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and opened Daniel's old closet. Most of his clothes were gone now, donated after the funeral 2 years earlier. But a few things remained. His winter coat, 2 flannel shirts, a cedar box on the top shelf. I pulled the box down carefully and opened it. Inside sat old photographs, insurance papers, and Daniel's leather watch. Beneath them rested a folded envelope with my name written across the front in his handwriting. Loretta. My breath caught instantly. I didn't remember seeing it before. The paper looked old. deliberately hidden. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note. If the family ever makes you feel unwanted, look deeper. Not everything around Vanessa is what it appears to be. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. Beneath the note rested a small brass key taped carefully to the paper. And suddenly, for the first time since my birthday dinner, something stronger than sadness began rising inside me. Suspicion. Because Daniel never wrote unnecessary words. And if my husband left that note before he died, then maybe he had seen something I hadn't. I didn't open the box immediately. I just sat there on the bedroom floor holding Daniel's note while rain slid quietly down the windows beside me. If the family ever makes you feel unwanted, look deeper. Those words stayed inside my head all night. Daniel had never been dramatic, never suspicious without reason. He spent 40 years fixing problems calmly, carefully, without raising his voice. Even during chemo treatments, he apologized to nurses for being inconvenient. So if my husband left me that message before he died, then something had frightened him. I barely slept again. By morning, the storm outside had passed, but the heaviness inside the house remained. The cruise photos kept appearing online like little knives. Breakfast buffets, poolside drinks, Emma dancing beside ship performers. Every picture carried the same message. Everyone belongs. Except you. I muted Vanessa's account after the 7th post. Not because it stopped hurting. Because humiliation becomes unbearable when it repeats too often. Around 10 o'clock, I drove downtown to the bank. The brass key from Daniel's envelope rested cold inside my coat pocket the entire drive there. Traffic lights blurred through the windshield while old memories kept surfacing. Daniel and I opened our first savings account together in that same bank 41 years earlier. We were broke back then. So broke we celebrated by splitting pancakes at a diner afterward because it was all we could afford. Back then, love felt simple. Nothing about family feels simple now. The young teller smiled politely when I approached. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" I slid the brass key across the counter carefully. "I believe my late husband rented a safety deposit box here." She typed for a moment, then paused. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. Box 214. It's still active under your joint authorization." My stomach tightened instantly. Still active. Daniel had hidden something here all this time. A few minutes later, the bank manager escorted me into a quiet vault room lined with metal boxes. The air smelled cold and sterile. He unlocked the outer mechanism, then stepped away respectfully. The moment I slid open the box, my pulse began hammering. Inside sat 3 things: a thick manila envelope, a flash drive, and a small jewelry pouch. I reached for the pouch first. Inside was my sapphire necklace. The real one. I stared at it in confusion. Because Vanessa had been wearing that necklace on the cruise. Or at least one identical to it. My hands suddenly felt unsteady. Then I opened the envelope. Inside were printed bank statements, copied emails, and several pages covered in Daniel's handwriting. The first sentence made my chest tighten immediately. "Loretta, if you are reading this, it means Vanessa continued exactly as I feared." I sat down hard in the small chair beside the vault table. Daniel's handwriting looked shakier than I remembered. Cancer had already weakened him by then. But his words remained precise, direct, cold. "She lies professionally. Not emotionally. Professionally." I kept reading. Over the final year of his illness, Daniel noticed unusual transfers from one of our family investment accounts. Small amounts at first. $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. Each withdrawal labeled as family expenses. But Daniel discovered the money eventually moved into accounts connected to Vanessa's private consulting business. My throat tightened. Vanessa handled many household finances after Daniel got sick. Ethan trusted her completely. Apparently too completely. There were copies of emails too. Most looked ordinary at first glance. School tuition, vacation planning, insurance forms. But Daniel highlighted certain phrases in red pen. "Don't mention this to your mother. She'll only make things emotional. We'll deal with her later." Her. Not mom. Not Loretta. Her. Funny how quickly people remove your humanity once they stop respecting you. I kept turning pages. Then one photograph slipped loose from the envelope. Vanessa stood outside a restaurant beside a tall, dark-haired man wearing a gray suit. His arm rested against her lower back intimately. The timestamp in the corner showed the picture was taken 8 months before Daniel died. I flipped the photo over. Daniel had written one name. Greg. A cold feeling crawled slowly up my spine. I suddenly remembered something strange from the cruise video. Vanessa kept checking her phone constantly during dinner, smiling at messages, tilting the screen away from Ethan. At the time, it barely registered. Now it felt different. Everything felt different. The bank manager knocked softly an hour later to ask if I needed more time. I didn't realize I'd been sitting there crying silently. Not dramatic crying, just exhausted tears sliding down a tired face. "Take your time," he said gently. I nodded without speaking. Because how do you explain to a stranger that your entire family suddenly feels unfamiliar? On the drive home, I stopped at a grocery store for milk. Normal errands suddenly felt comforting. Predictable. Simple. Inside the dairy aisle, an older couple argued softly over yogurt flavors while holding hands. The sight nearly broke me. Daniel used to argue with me about yogurt too. He claimed vanilla was aggressively boring. I stood there staring at refrigerator shelves far too long before realizing my eyes had filled again. Grief and betrayal together create a special kind of loneliness. One mourns the dead, the other mourns the living. When I got home, Ethan was sitting in my driveway. My heart jumped instantly. For one pathetic second, I thought maybe he came to apologize. Maybe motherhood never fully removes hope from women like me. He climbed out of his SUV looking tanned from the cruise. Relaxed. Expensive sunglasses rested on top of his head. The sight of him physically hurt me. Because while I spent my birthday crying beside untouched cake, my son spent the week drinking cocktails in the Mediterranean sun. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. Casually. Like he hadn't humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. I unlocked the front door slowly. "You remembered where I live?" I asked quietly. His expression tightened immediately. "Come on. Don't do that. Don't do that." Interesting how hurt children become when mothers finally sound hurt back. Inside the kitchen, Ethan leaned against the counter while I poured coffee neither of us really wanted. "I said happy birthday," he muttered. I stared at him. "That's your defense." He sighed heavily. "Vanessa planned the trip months ago. It was complicated." "No," I replied softly. "Basic human decency is actually very simple." His jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like the teenage boy who hated being confronted after lying. Then came the sentence that finally cracked something inside me. "You take things too personally lately." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because cruelty sounds unbelievable when spoken calmly. "Too personally?" I repeated. "Ethan, your entire family disappeared onto a cruise ship on my birthday while I sat alone waiting for you." He rubbed his forehead impatiently. "We didn't think it was a huge deal." There it was. The humiliation stripped completely bare. Not forgetting. Not misunderstanding. Not bad timing. My pain simply wasn't important enough to interrupt their vacation. I looked at my son standing in the kitchen Daniel built with his own hands. The same kitchen where Ethan blew out birthday candles every year growing up. The same kitchen where I sat beside him after his divorce scare 3 years earlier while Vanessa threatened to leave him over financial stress. I protected that boy his entire life. And somehow he grew into a man capable of leaving his mother alone on her 65th birthday without losing sleep. Then Ethan said something even colder. "You know Vanessa feels uncomfortable around you." I froze. Uncomfortable. "She thinks you judge her constantly." The audacity almost stunned me speechless. Vanessa isolated me, excluded me, lied about me, used my dead husband's necklace. And somehow she was the victim. I stared at Ethan for several seconds before speaking again. "Did Vanessa tell you not to invite me on that cruise?" He hesitated. Tiny. Brief. But enough. That single hesitation answered everything. I felt something settle inside me then. A calmness colder than anger. Because once betrayal becomes undeniable, grief changes shape. You stop begging for love. You start seeing people clearly. Ethan glanced toward the dining room awkwardly. "The cruise really was fun," he said. Carefully. "The kids loved it." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure they did." Then I walked past him into the hallway and opened the closet beside the stairs. Inside hung Daniel's old navy coat. I reached into the pocket slowly and wrapped my fingers around the flash drive from the safety deposit box. Because whatever Daniel discovered before he died, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. After Ethan left, the house felt colder than before. Not emptier. Colder. There's a difference. Empty means someone is missing. Cold means someone chose to hurt you before they walked away. I stood at the kitchen window watching my son's SUV disappear down the street, while evening sunlight faded across the yard Daniel once spent entire summers caring for. The hydrangeas along the fence still bloomed because I kept watering them. Funny how women continue nurturing things long after love stops being returned. I locked the front door quietly. Then I carried the flash drive into Daniel's old office. I hadn't touched that room much since the funeral. His reading glasses still rested beside the lamp. Pens remained lined neatly inside the top drawer because Daniel believed clutter reflected confusion. The room still smelled faintly of cedar and old books. For a second, grief hit me so hard I had to steady myself against the desk. I missed my husband suddenly, violently, not just because he was gone, because he would have known what to do. Daniel always saw through people faster than I did. I was the forgiving one. He was the observant one. And now I finally understood why his eyes sometimes lingered too long on Vanessa during family dinners. Not attraction, concern. I sat down slowly and inserted the flash drive into the computer. Several folders appeared instantly. Bank records, property, emails, private. My pulse began beating harder. Daniel hadn't left random suspicions behind. He built an entire archive. The private folder required a password. For a moment, I stared helplessly at the screen. Then instinctively, I typed our anniversary date. Wrong password. I tried Ethan's birthday. Nothing. Then suddenly I remembered something Daniel once whispered jokingly during chemo after. Forgetting where he left his wallet. The answer to everything important in my life is you, Loretta. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed. Loretta 65. The folder opened. I stopped breathing. Inside were dozens of files. Photos, scanned documents, recorded audio clips, and one video dated 8 months before Daniel died. I clicked play. The footage looked shaky, recorded from inside a parked car at night. At first, nothing happened. Then Vanessa appeared outside an upscale restaurant downtown. She laughed at something someone said off camera. A second later, the same dark-haired man from the photograph stepped beside her. Greg. He kissed her. Not friendly. Not accidental. The kind of kiss people share when they've forgotten the rest of the world exists. My stomach twisted immediately. Then came the worst part. Vanessa looked happy. Relaxed. More genuine than I'd seen her around Ethan in years. The timestamp showed Daniel recorded this while actively dying from cancer treatments. My poor husband spent his final months investigating his own daughter-in-law while trying not to destroy the family before he was gone. I covered my mouth suddenly as tears filled my eyes again. Not because Vanessa cheated. Because Daniel carried this burden alone. There was another file beneath the video labeled, "Listen carefully." I opened the audio recording. Static crackled briefly before voices emerged. Vanessa and Greg. I'm telling you, Vanessa said quietly. Once Daniel's gone, Ethan will finally have full access. Greg laughed softly. And the mother? A pause. Then Vanessa answered. She's emotional. Easy to isolate. Easy to isolate. The words hit harder than screaming ever could. Not because they were cruel. Because they were calculated. I sat frozen in Daniel's office while the recording continued. Greg asked if Ethan suspected anything. Vanessa laughed again. Ethan believes whatever keeps peace in the house. I closed my eyes. That part hurt because it was true. My son spent his entire adult life avoiding conflict. Even if avoiding conflict meant sacrificing his own mother. The recording ended with another sentence that made my blood run cold. Once the house transfers, none of this will matter anyway. House transfers. I immediately opened the property folder. Inside sat copies of legal paperwork connected to our home. Most of it looked routine until I found one unsigned document dated 11 months earlier. Transfer of partial ownership authorization. My name appeared on the form. Forged. I knew instantly because Daniel used to tease me for how dramatically I looped the letter L in my signature. This version looked stiff. Practiced. Fake. My heart started pounding harder. Vanessa hadn't just isolated me emotionally. She had been trying to move assets quietly too. I leaned back slowly in Daniel's chair, suddenly exhausted beyond words. Every memory from the past 5 years began rearranging itself inside my mind, like puzzle pieces finally locking together. The sudden pressure for Ethan and Vanessa to help with finances after Daniel got sick. The way Vanessa insisted certain bills were too stressful for me to handle. The strange tension whenever I asked direct questions about investments. Even the cruise suddenly looked different. Not just cruelty. Positioning. A woman slowly removing obstacles before claiming territory. Outside the office window, evening settled across the neighborhood in soft blue shadows. I realized I hadn't eaten all day, but hunger felt unimportant now. At 8:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Vanessa. I stared at her name, lighting up the screen for several seconds before answering. Loretta, she said brightly. We're back home now. Just wanted to check how you're feeling. Her voice sounded warm, concerned, polished. If I hadn't heard those recordings an hour earlier, I might have believed her. I'm fine, I replied calmly. Oh good. Ethan said you seemed upset earlier. Upset. Interesting how manipulative people always minimize pain with soft language. I was disappointed, I corrected gently. A brief silence followed. Then Vanessa sighed dramatically. You know, sometimes I think you misunderstand me completely. There it was. The victim routine. I said nothing. She continued carefully. I've tried so hard to include you in this family. I actually looked around the empty house when she said that. At the untouched guest room. At Emma's coloring books gathering dust. At the birthday cake still sitting uneaten in my refrigerator. Tried so hard. Some lies become almost artistic with enough practice. Then Vanessa lowered her voice slightly. Ethan worries about you. Does he? Yes. He thinks loneliness is making you focus on negative things. Negative things. Like being abandoned on my birthday. Like being lied about to relatives. Like forged signatures. Like affairs. I finally understood something important then. Women like Vanessa don't manipulate through explosions. They manipulate through exhaustion. They make reality feel negotiable until victims stop trusting themselves. But Daniel left me evidence. Cold, clear, undeniable evidence. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt confused. I felt awake. Vanessa kept talking softly into the phone. I know grief changes people. That sentence nearly made me laugh. Grief didn't change me. It revealed everyone else. I should go, I said quietly. Before she could answer, I hung up. Then I sat motionless in Daniel's office listening to the silence settle around me again. But tonight the silence felt different. Not helpless. Waiting. I opened the final folder on the flash drive. Inside sat a scanned DNA report. My breath caught instantly. Across the top appeared Ethan's name. Below it, paternity exclusion, 0% probability for several seconds. My mind refused to process the words. Then Tommy's smiling face flashed through my memory. My grandson. The little boy who called Ethan Dad since the day he learned to speak. My chest tightened painfully. Daniel knew. My husband knew before he died. I kept staring at the report while my hands slowly turned cold. Then I noticed something even worse. The listed biological father's first name. Greg. The same man from the recordings. The same man kissing Vanessa. The same man discussing my house while Daniel was dying. Suddenly, every piece clicked together so violently it almost made me nauseous. The affair, the manipulation, the isolation, the money, the forged documents, the cruise. None of it was random. Vanessa wasn't simply cruel. She was building a future, and my family was standing in the way. I didn't cry after reading the DNA report. That surprised me. 5 days earlier, I cried over an untouched birthday cake. Now I was staring at proof that my daughter-in-law had betrayed my son, manipulated my family, and possibly tried to steal our home while my husband was dying. And somehow, I felt calm. Not peaceful, just clear, like fog finally lifting after years of walking through it blind. I sat alone in Daniel's office until almost midnight rereading every file on the flash drive. Each document revealed another layer, another lie, another quiet humiliation I'd ignored because I wanted my family to stay together. Vanessa counted on that. Women like her always count on older mothers choosing silence over conflict, especially mothers afraid of losing access to grandchildren. But something inside me had changed. The birthday dinner broke the last piece of me that still begged for acceptance. Now I simply wanted the truth. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I made coffee and started planning carefully. Not revenge. Preparation. There's a difference. I called Daniel's old attorney first. Martin Keller. He answered on the second ring, sounding half asleep. Loretta? Martin, I said quietly. I think Daniel was trying to protect me before he died. Silence. Then his tone changed immediately. What happened? By noon, I sat across from Martin inside his office downtown, while rain streaked softly across the windows behind him. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner too. Grief ages everyone connected to death. I handed him copies of the forged property transfer documents first. His expression darkened instantly. She tried this, he muttered. She failed? I asked. Martin nodded slowly. Daniel blocked any ownership modifications 6 months before he passed. He suspected financial manipulation. I closed my eyes briefly. Even dying, my husband was still protecting me. Martin continued reviewing the documents carefully while I explained the recordings, the affair, and finally the DNA results. That part shocked him silent. Ethan doesn't know? He asked carefully. I shook my head. The office suddenly felt unbearably quiet. Then Martin leaned back heavily in his chair. Loretta, this could destroy your son. I stared down at my hands. Wrinkled now, thinner than before. Hands that packed school lunches for Ethan every morning for 12 years. Hands that held him after nightmares. Hands that clapped at every baseball game, every graduation, every milestone. You think I don't know that? I whispered. That was the cruelest part of all. Vanessa betrayed me, but the truth would shatter Ethan. And despite everything, he was still my child. Martin remained silent for a long moment before speaking again. What do you want to do? I thought about that question carefully, then answered honestly. I want her to stop turning my family into something poisonous. For the first time since Daniel died, Martin smiled faintly. That sounds exactly like your husband. When I returned home that afternoon, a delivery box waited on my porch. Cruise souvenirs. Vanessa had mailed gifts. Inside sat cheap tourist trinkets. A keychain, a snow globe, Greek cookies crushed during shipping, and a handwritten card. Sorry you couldn't make memories with us this time. Maybe next year, Red Heart. I read the sentence twice, then slowly placed the card face down on the kitchen counter. The cruelty of manipulative people often hides inside fake kindness. That little heart at the end nearly made me sick. Around 4 o'clock, Emma called unexpectedly. Grandma. Her tiny voice instantly softened something inside my chest. Hi, sweetheart. You mad at us? Children always sense tension adults pretend to hide. I swallowed carefully. No, baby. A pause. Then Emma lowered her voice. Mommy said you don't like traveling with family anymore. There it was again. The narrative. Repeated so many times, even the children believed it. I stared out the kitchen window at Daniel's garden while choosing my words carefully. Emma, I said softly. Did Grandma ever tell you she didn't want to see you? No. Then maybe some grown-ups say things that aren't completely true. Silence. Then very quietly, Emma asked, Did you really cry on your birthday? My throat closed instantly. Children hear more than adults realize. Who told you that? I whispered. Another pause. Tommy heard Mommy and Daddy fighting. I closed my eyes. So Ethan knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to argue. Enough to feel guilty. That mattered. Before hanging up, Emma whispered one more thing. Mommy said old people get too emotional. I nearly laughed from the sheer cruelty of it. Old people. As if aging itself made dignity optional. As if motherhood expires at 65. After the call ended, I walked slowly upstairs and opened my closet. Inside hung the navy dress I wore on my birthday. I touched the pearl buttons carefully. Then suddenly, I remembered something strange from years earlier. One Christmas dinner, Vanessa rearranged the seating chart at the last minute. She moved me away from Ethan and seated her parents beside him instead. When I looked confused, she smiled sweetly and said, Oh, Loretta, younger people should sit together. It keeps the energy fun. At the time, everyone laughed awkwardly, including me. Now I understood what really happened. Isolation rarely begins with dramatic cruelty. It starts with tiny repositionings. One chair at a time. One exclusion at a time. Until suddenly you realize you no longer belong in your own family. At 7:15 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, he said quietly. For once, he sounded tired. Not defensive, just tired. How's Tommy? I asked. The question surprised him. Fine. A pause followed. Then Ethan sighed heavily. Mom, Vanessa thinks things have been tense lately. I almost smiled. Tense. Such a gentle word for systematic emotional destruction. I wonder why, I replied calmly. Another silence. Then Ethan lowered his voice. She feels like you judge her. There it was again. Always circling back to Vanessa's feelings. Never mind. I leaned back slowly against the kitchen counter. Ethan, I said softly. Did Vanessa ever tell you why she scheduled a cruise during my birthday? She didn't think it mattered. That answer landed harder than yelling. Because indifference wounds deeper than anger. At least anger requires emotion. Indifference simply erases you. Then Ethan said something unexpected. She's been under stress. I closed my eyes. Briefly. From what? Lying professionally. The silence that followed was immediate. Sharp. Dangerous. Ethan's voice changed instantly. What does that mean? Too late. I'd said more than intended. I recovered carefully. It means I'm tired of pretending everything is normal. His breathing shifted over the phone. Uneasy now. Suspicious. Good. For years, I was the only uncomfortable person in this family. Maybe it was time someone else lost sleep too. Mom. Ethan began slowly. Is there something you're trying to say? I looked toward Daniel's office upstairs. Toward the flash drive. Toward the DNA report hidden inside the desk drawer. Toward the truth waiting like a lit match near gasoline. Yes, I answered quietly. There is. Then I hung up. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just enough to let silence begin doing its work. Because for the first time in years, I finally understood something important. Vanessa built her power inside this family by controlling information. But secrets become fragile once another person knows where they're buried. And now, I knew where all of them were. 3 days later, I invited the entire family to dinner. Again. Funny, isn't it? After everything Vanessa did, after every humiliation, every lie, every tiny calculated wound, I still cooked for them. But this time wasn't about hope. This time was about truth. I texted Ethan personally. Sunday dinner at my house. 6 p.m. Family only. He responded 20 minutes later. Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Come hungry. That was all. Sunday arrived warm and unnaturally beautiful. The kind of golden summer evening that almost tricks people into believing ugly things can't happen beneath nice weather. I spent the afternoon cooking quietly. Roast chicken, garlic potatoes, fresh rolls, lemon pie. The same meals Ethan begged for growing up. The same table, the same dining room. But this time, I removed the birthday decorations completely. No candles, no flowers, no handwritten place cards. I wasn't celebrating family anymore. I was exposing it. Around 5 o'clock, I opened Daniel's desk drawer and looked once more at the DNA report. The paper felt heavier every time I touched it. Beside it sat copies of the recordings, photographs, and forged property documents. Enough truth to destroy several lives. And somehow, despite everything, my hands still trembled. Not because I doubted Vanessa deserved consequences. Because mothers never stop fearing pain for their children. Even grown ones. Especially grown ones. At 5:47 p.m., the first car pulled into the driveway. Vanessa's white SUV. Right on time. Of course. Manipulative people are rarely late when appearances matter. I opened the front door before they knocked. Vanessa stood smiling in a cream-colored blouse with expensive gold earrings catching the evening sunlight. Beautiful. Polished. Dangerous. Behind her, Ethan looked exhausted. Tommy ran inside immediately yelling, "Grandma!" I bent down and hugged him tightly. Too tightly, probably. Because suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about the DNA report hidden upstairs. Not Ethan's son. And yet Ethan loved that little boy completely. Life can be unbearably cruel to good-hearted people. Emma hugged me next. You smell like cookies, she whispered happily. For one painful second, I almost canceled everything. Because children don't deserve to stand near explosions adults create. Then Vanessa stepped inside and glanced around the dining room. Her eyes narrowed briefly. No decorations. No birthday references. No emotional vulnerability waiting for her to control. Good. Wow, she said brightly. You went all out. I smiled politely. I wanted tonight to matter. Something flickered across her expression. Tiny. Uneasy. She felt it too. The shift. During dinner, Vanessa performed perfection beautifully. Laughing softly. Touching Ethan's arm. Complimenting the food. Asking Tommy about school. To anyone watching, she looked like a loving wife and devoted mother. That's the terrifying thing about people like Vanessa. Their cruelty hides best behind charm. Halfway through dinner, she rearranged the seating casually. Tommy, sweetheart, switch seats with Grandpa Carl so Ethan can sit closer to me. Grandpa Carl, my own brother-in-law, inside my house. And somehow Vanessa still spoke like she owned the room. Carl obeyed awkwardly. Everyone did. That's how control works. Not loudly. Quietly. one small command at a time until everyone forgets who the house originally belonged to. I watched Ethan move beside her automatically. Conditioned. Trained. Vanessa smiled at me over her wine glass. You know, Loretta, she said sweetly, this house really is too large for one person. There it was. Not even 10 minutes before the property comments started. I cut into my chicken calmly. Is it? Well, Vanessa laughed lightly. At some point downsizing just makes sense. Less stress. Less maintenance. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her. Good. Let him squirm. For years I was the only uncomfortable person at this table. Tommy suddenly pointed toward the hallway. Grandma, is Grandpa Daniel's office still locked? The room went strangely quiet. Children accidentally walk into truths adults avoid. Yes, I answered gently. Tommy frowned. Mommy said that room would probably become Daddy's someday. Vanessa froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. Ethan looked confused immediately. What? Vanessa recovered fast. Oh please, she laughed. Tommy misunderstands everything. No. Children repeat everything. I took a slow sip of water, then asked quietly, Vanessa, how long have you known Greg? The room stopped breathing. Even the children looked up. Vanessa's smile disappeared instantly. Ethan blinked. Who's Greg? Silence. Heavy. Sharp. Vanessa laughed suddenly, but the sound came too fast. Loretta, what kind of question is that? I folded my napkin carefully onto the table. The kind people ask before they stop pretending. Ethan looked between us now. Confused. Tense. What's going on? Vanessa touched his arm immediately. Your mother's upset about the birthday thing, and now she's creating drama. Creating drama. Interesting phrase from a woman hiding an affair. I looked directly at her. No, I said calmly. You created drama. I just found it. Vanessa's eyes changed then. The warmth vanished completely. For the first time, the real woman underneath finally appeared. Cold. Calculating. Dangerous. Loretta, she said quietly, I think you're confused again. Again. There was that word. The subtle little attack on my age. My memory. My stability. The same tactic she used for years. But tonight, I wasn't alone anymore. Tonight I had proof. I leaned back slowly in my chair. No, I replied softly. But your son's father might be. The silence afterward felt violent. Ethan stared at me like he physically stopped understanding language. Vanessa went pale instantly. Carl lowered his fork. Ruth whispered, Oh my God. Tommy looked between everyone nervously. Mom. Vanessa stood abruptly so fast her wine glass tipped sideways across the tablecloth. You have lost your mind. Interesting. Not denial. Attack. Always attack first. Ethan looked at his wife. Then at me. Then back at her. What is she talking about? Vanessa's breathing had changed now. Shallow. Fast. Cornered. I stood slowly from the table and walked into the hallway. Behind me, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire house felt suspended in terror. When I returned, I carried a thick manila envelope in my hands. Ethan stared at it immediately. What is that? I placed it gently onto the center of the dining table beside the mashed potatoes. The ordinary domesticity of that moment almost felt surreal. A family dinner. Children at the table. Warm rolls. And enough secrets sitting inside one envelope to destroy everything. Vanessa whispered my name carefully. A warning now. Not sweetness. Loretta. I met her eyes calmly. For the first time in years, she looked afraid of me. Good. I opened the envelope slowly and slid the DNA report toward Ethan. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then quietly, carefully, I said the sentence that finally shattered the room. Ask your wife why your son has another man's DNA. Nobody touched the food after that. The roast chicken cooled untouched beside the candlelight, while my family sat frozen around the table like strangers trapped inside the same nightmare. Ethan stared at the DNA report without blinking. At first, I honestly don't think his brain understood what he was reading. People imagine betrayal arrives dramatically. It doesn't. Sometimes it arrives quietly in black ink across a single sheet of paper. Paternity exclusion, 0% probability. I watched. My son reread the sentence 3 times. Then 4. His hands slowly started shaking. What? He whispered weakly. What is this? Vanessa stood abruptly from her chair. It's fake. Too fast. Too loud. The children jumped immediately. Tommy looked terrified. Emma grabbed Ruth's arm silently. I kept my voice calm. No, I said softly. It's verified. Vanessa pointed at me with trembling anger. You went through our private information? Interesting. Still not denial. Still no, that isn't true. Only outrage at being exposed. Ethan looked up slowly. His face had completely changed now. Pale. Lost. Vanessa, he whispered. Tell me this isn't real. She turned toward him instantly, eyes filling with tears so quickly it almost looked rehearsed. Manipulative people cry on command frighteningly well. She's trying to destroy us, Vanessa whispered. Us. Not the accusation. Not the report. Us. I leaned forward slightly. You already destroyed him. The room fell silent again. Vanessa's expression hardened immediately. There's something wrong with you, she snapped. Ever since Daniel died, you've become obsessed with attacking me. Attacking. Funny word coming from a woman who erased me from my own family, one humiliation at a time. Ethan suddenly stood up, so violently his chair slammed backward onto the floor. Stop. Everyone froze. I hadn't heard my son raise his voice like that since he was 17. He looked at Vanessa and now, with something horrifying in his eyes. Hope collapsing. Tell me the truth. Vanessa shook her head immediately. She forged this somehow. I opened the envelope again slowly and removed another photograph. Greg kissing her outside the restaurant. I slid it across the table. Then another. Bank transfers. Then another. Audio transcript excerpts. The entire dining room felt poisoned now. Every piece of evidence stripped another layer from Vanessa's perfect image. Ethan stared at the photographs like they physically hurt to touch. What the hell is this? He whispered. Vanessa's breathing became shallow. Fast. Cornered animals panic in recognizable ways. She's been spying on me. No, I replied calmly. My husband was protecting this family. While he was dying. That sentence landed like a slap. Even Vanessa flinched. For the first time all evening, she looked genuinely shaken. Because Daniel wasn't here anymore to defend himself. And yet somehow, even dead, he was still exposing her. Tommy suddenly looked at Ethan with frightened eyes. Daddy? That voice nearly broke me. Children should never witness adults destroying each other. But Vanessa brought this poison into the house years ago. Tonight merely uncovered it. Ethan looked down at the DNA report again, then finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. How long? Vanessa stared at him silently. How long? He repeated louder. Her lips trembled. Then finally, quietly. A few years. The sound Ruth made beside me was almost like choking. Ethan physically stepped backward, like the words hit him in the chest. A few years, he repeated. Vanessa started crying harder now. It wasn't serious, he laughed suddenly. Not happy laughter. The kind people make right before they completely fall apart. Not serious, he said hoarsely. Tommy isn't my son. Tommy started crying immediately. Oh my God, Ruth whispered. Carl looked away entirely. And through all of it, Vanessa still tried controlling the room. It was complicated, she snapped suddenly. You were never home. You buried yourself in work. There it was. Blame. Manipulators always reach for blame when lies collapse. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You cheated on me. You abandoned me emotionally. No, he shouted. I paid for your life. The children flinched again. Emma buried her face into Ruth's shoulder. My heart hurt watching them. Not because truth came out. Because children always inherit the emotional debris adults leave behind. Then Ethan looked at me suddenly. Broken. Small. Like the little boy who once cried after neighborhood kids bullied him at school. You knew? He whispered. The pain in that question almost crushed me. I answered honestly. Not until recently. He covered his mouth suddenly and turned away. His shoulders shook once. Just once. My son was trying not to cry in front of everyone. And somehow that hurt worse than the birthday dinner. Vanessa pointed toward me again desperately. She manipulated this entire thing. I stood slowly. No, I said quietly. I finally stopped letting you manipulate me. Silence. Pure silence. Even Vanessa stopped talking. Because deep down, she knew it was true. For years, she controlled the emotional temperature of this family. She decided who belonged, who felt welcome, who got isolated, who got erased. And all of us adjusted ourselves around her dysfunction because confronting it felt harder. Until now. Tommy suddenly looked up at Ethan with tears streaming down his face. Daddy, am I still yours? That sentence shattered the room completely. Ethan collapsed into his chair immediately. All anger vanished from his face at once. Only heartbreak remained. He pulled Tommy into his arms instantly. Hey, he whispered shakily. Hey, listen to me. Tommy cried harder. I don't want to lose you. Ethan buried his face against the boy's hair. You won't. I looked away then because tears finally burned my own eyes too. Not for Vanessa. Never for Vanessa. For my son. Because betrayal doesn't only destroy trust. It destroys identity. Everything Ethan believed about his marriage, his family, his son, his future, gone in a single dinner. Vanessa suddenly grabbed her purse aggressively. I'm leaving. No apology. No remorse. Just escape. But before she reached the hallway, Ethan spoke quietly behind her. Who else knew? She stopped moving. Nobody breathed. Slowly, she turned back around. What? Greg, Ethan said coldly. Who else knew Tommy was his? Vanessa hesitated. Tiny. Fatal. Then Ethan nodded slowly to himself. Unbelievable. He looked physically ill now. Then came the final blow. The cruises, he whispered. The money. My mother. His eyes lifted toward me finally. And for the first time in years, he truly saw me. Not as a burden. Not as emotional. Not as difficult. As someone systematically hurt while he looked away. Vanessa tried one last time. She always hated me. I almost laughed. Hated her? No. Hatred requires emotional equality. What I felt now was grief for the family she poisoned. Then Ethan said something that finally made Vanessa lose control completely. Get out. She blinked. What? Get out. The words came low. Dead calm. Terrifying. Vanessa stared around the room like she expected someone to defend her. Nobody did. Not Ruth. Not Carl. Not even the children. Because eventually manipulation collapses beneath the weight of truth. Vanessa grabbed her purse harder, then looked directly at me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. You ruined this family. I met her stare calmly. No, I replied softly. You did. Then she walked out the front door into the dark summer night. And for the first time in years, the house finally felt honest. The house stayed quiet for a very long time after Vanessa left. Nobody moved at first. The front door had barely stopped shaking from her exit when the reality of everything finally settled across the room like smoke after a fire. Tommy still sat crying against Ethan's chest. Emma clung silently to Ruth beside the window. And my son looked destroyed. Not angry anymore. Not shouting. Just broken. I slowly began clearing the dinner plates because I didn't know what else to do. Funny how women continue cleaning even while their world collapses. The forks clinked softly against china while nobody spoke. Finally, Ethan looked up at me with red eyes. You knew for days? His voice sounded hollow. I nodded carefully. Yes. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I was trying to protect you. Because I needed proof. Because part of me still hoped I was wrong. But none of those answers mattered anymore. So instead, I told him the truth. Because I knew hearing it would destroy you. That broke him completely. Ethan bent forward suddenly, both hands covering his face while Tommy clung tighter to him. And for the first time since Daniel died, I saw my son look small again. Not weak. Wounded. There's a difference. Ruth quietly took the children upstairs after that. Emma looked back at me halfway up the staircase. Grandma. Yes, sweetheart. Are we still family? That question nearly shattered my heart. I forced myself to smile gently. Always. She nodded once and disappeared upstairs. The house fell silent again. Only the kitchen clock ticked softly in the background. Ethan finally spoke without looking at me. She told me you were difficult. I kept drying dishes slowly. She told everyone that. He laughed bitterly. She said you judged her, controlled me, made her uncomfortable. I placed a plate carefully into the cabinet before answering. Ethan, manipulative people always need a villain. Otherwise people start noticing the real problem. He stared blankly at the table, then whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I failed you. That hurt more than the birthday dinner. More than the cruise. More than all the lies. Because deep down, Ethan wasn't cruel. Weak, yes. Avoidant, absolutely. But not cruel. Vanessa didn't create his weakness. She weaponized it. I walked over slowly and sat beside him. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then finally I reached over and touched his hand. The same hand I held crossing streets when he was 5. You were manipulated too, I said softly. He shook his head immediately. No. I ignored it. Silence. Then he laughed bitterly again. All those times you got excluded, I looked down quietly. The birthday parties. I nodded. The vacations. Another nod. His breathing grew uneven. And I let her convince me you were overreacting. There it was. The real betrayal. Not Vanessa's lies. Ethan choosing comfort over truth every single time. He wiped his face roughly. She made me think peace meant agreeing with her. I looked toward Daniel's empty chair at the dining table. No, I whispered. Peace built on humiliation is just quiet cruelty. That sentence stayed hanging between us for a long time. Around midnight, Ethan finally stood up slowly. I should go. I looked upstairs toward the guest rooms. The children can stay here tonight. He hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Thank you. When he reached the front door, he stopped suddenly. Mom. Yes. His eyes filled again. I really forgot your birthday mattered. The honesty of that confession hurt terribly because I believed him. Not maliciously forgotten. Emotionally forgotten. There's something uniquely painful about realizing people stopped considering your feelings important. But I smiled softly anyway. I know. After he left, I stood alone in the hallway listening to the silence. Only now, it felt different from the silence on my birthday. Back then, silence meant abandonment. Tonight, it meant truth finally had room to breathe. The next few weeks were ugly. There's no graceful way for families to collapse. Vanessa tried fighting everything at first. She posted vague emotional quotes online about toxic mothers-in-law. She told friends Ethan was emotionally abusive. She even hinted that I fabricated evidence because grief made me unstable. But lies weaken quickly once truth becomes public, especially when proof exists. Martin helped Ethan freeze several joint accounts after discovering irregular transfers connected to Vanessa's consulting business. The forged property documents became impossible to explain away. Then came Greg. Apparently, Greg panicked once Ethan contacted him directly. Cowards usually do. Within 48 hours, the affair was no longer secret. By then, even Vanessa's own friends stopped defending her. I should have felt victorious. But honestly, I mostly felt tired. Because revenge doesn't heal betrayal. It simply removes the mask hiding it. One afternoon about a month later, Tommy asked me a question while we baked cookies together. Grandma. Yes, sweetheart. Am I still Ethan's son? I stopped stirring instantly. Children carry adult heartbreak in terrifying ways. I crouched beside him carefully. Being a father isn't only about DNA, I said softly. It's about love. Tommy looked down. He still cries sometimes. My chest tightened. I know. Then Tommy whispered something that nearly broke me. I heard Mommy say I ruined everything. I closed my eyes briefly. No child should carry that sentence. Ever. I pulled him gently into my arms. You listen to me, I whispered firmly. None of this is your fault. He nodded against my shoulder silently. Upstairs, I heard Ethan moving around the guest room. Yes, the guest room. Because after Vanessa left, he and the children stayed with me temporarily. Funny how life works sometimes. The woman once excluded from the family table became the person holding what remained of it together. One evening near the end of summer, I cooked dinner again. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, garlic bread, and salad. The dining room looked smaller somehow, without all the tension inside it. Only 3 places sat at the table now. Mine, Ethan's. The children shared one side together laughing over something Tommy spilled. No expensive decorations. No pretending. No manipulative sweetness hiding poison underneath. Just people trying to heal honestly. Halfway through dinner, Emma looked at me suddenly. Grandma. Yes. Can we celebrate your birthday again next year? The room went quiet. Ethan lowered his eyes immediately. I looked at my granddaughter's hopeful little face and smiled softly. Yes, sweetheart. Then Tommy grinned. And this time we'll actually come. Everybody laughed. Even Ethan. A small laugh. Fragile, but real. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house finally quieted, I sat alone on the back porch wrapped in Daniel's old sweater. Summer crickets hummed softly in the dark yard. I looked up at the stars and thought about the woman I was on my 65th birthday, sitting alone beside untouched cake, wondering why her family forgot her. Now I finally understood something painful. They didn't forget me. They stopped seeing me. And sometimes losing that illusion hurts more than losing people themselves. But I also learned something else. Family is not the people who sit at your table during easy moments. Family is the people who still reach for you after truth makes everything uncomfortable. At 65, I lost the fantasy of a perfect family. But strangely enough, I think I finally found the real one.